As I discussed in my previous video, the word bearers are defined by truth. However, those at the head of the Legion do not always achieve that aspiration, as Erebus and Corpheron, unlike Lorgar, are entirely dishonest individuals who are more concerned with their place in the universe instead of the role they play within it. However, there is one person who more than anything else lived up to this ideal. That individual is Argel Tal. Argel Tal is one of the few Chaos Marines that I can safely say has a good heart. He is easily one of the most endearing Warhammer characters, and before you continue watching this video, go read the first Heretic, Betrayer, and Know No Fear. These were some of the main sources for this video and are genuinely some of the best 40k fiction that exist. So with that out of the way, Argel Tal was born on the planet of Colchis. He was found by the chaplain Erebus and inducted into the Legion. He would eventually take on the role of the captain of the 7th Assault Company, the Serrated Sun, but that is not important right now. What is important is how him and the rest of the Legion were shocked and completely distraught by the very public humiliation they faced at the hands of the Emperor of Mankind. And Lorgar, more than anyone else, was having a nervous breakdown and just completely decompensating. The first person to come to his aid was Argel Tal. This would give Lorgar a strong positive impression of who Argel Tal was, and this attention and favor he drew from the Primarch would be something that both Corpheron and Erebus would resent. However, he was also responsible for aiding a woman who lived on Kor who survived the bombing of the city, a woman named Cyrene, and Cyrene would be a strong grounding force for not only Argel Tal, but the Legion and any other worlds that the Word Bearers had control of, being seen as some sort of holy figure. But in the aftermath of these events, Lorgar would take a small contingent of the Word Bearers Legion, Argel Tal's company included, to go on what was referred to on Colchis as the pilgrimage. Just because the Emperor of Mankind may be a false god, does not mean that there are not other gods that are worthy of worship, and Argel Tal and Lorgar were of the same mind on that subject and were fully devoted to that cause. Their journey would take them to the world of Cadia, where Argel Tal, alongside the rest of his company, were shown not only the fall of the Eldar, but the potential futures that they may live, alongside the Emperor's gene labs and the scattering of the Primarchs. They were shown so much that any sort of loyalty they would still have to the Imperium and any lies the Emperor spewed were all for naught, as they were one of the few people in the galaxy who actually had a reasonable understanding of what was actually going on. This would give Argel Tal and the Legion a new sense of purpose. But one key thing would occur during this time that would shape the rest of Argel Tal's life. Of the 100 men of the 7th Assault Company, only 40 of them would return to Lorgar and his Legion after being stuck in the warp for what felt like 7 months, but for the rest of the Legion, only seemed like a matter of mere minutes. You see, Argel Tal died and came back to life. And the reason for this is because of the fact that he was now sharing his consciousness with a demon named Raum. So when Argel Tal and the rest of the Serrated Sun emerged back into Lorgar's presence, Lorgar could tell there was something wrong. But Argel Tal was not worried. He was nervous, but not necessarily worried. He knew that inevitably this was the plan the gods had for him, and was perfectly fine to do whatever that entailed, even if it meant sharing bodies with a demon. Him and his 40 remaining possessed would become the Gal Vorbak, and while the demons inside them would largely remain dormant for the rest of the Wordbearers' contributions to the Great Crusade, Argel Tal was almost always at its forefront, leading the Gal Vorbak as the Legion's elite, often fighting alongside the Emperor's custodians. Because after Monarchia, the Emperor tasked 15 custodians to basically babysit the Legion and make sure they weren't getting up to any sort of shenanigans. Needless to say, they were absolutely terrible at their jobs, but many of the Gal Vorbak, Argel Tal especially, began to strike up genuine friendships with many of the custodians. And this wasn't a deception tactic. Argel Tal actually earned the respect of the Shield Captain Aquilon, and vice versa. They would often spend days eating together, sparring in the fighting pits, or just talking. They got considerably close, and this is even more heartbreaking when you consider that Argel Tal was the one who had to lie to Aquilon about the fate of one of the custodians accompanying Lorgar's planetfall onto Cadia, and seeing all the decadent stuff and realizing that Lorgar was basically okay with it, tried to arrest him, which resulted in Argel Tal throwing a sword directly through the custodian's mouth, merely incapacitating him. Yes, I say incapacitate. In the book it says incapacitate, because apparently taking a sword through the mouth and having it stick outside of the back of your head doesn't kill a custodian. So needless to say, despite Argel Tal's loyalty to the Legion and Lorgar, he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And when the heresy began and the Word Bearers would be called to reinforce the legions at Isstvan V, Argel Tal, despite knowing this day would come, had severe difficulty with betraying those he genuinely considered friends. He would even go so far as to perform childlike delaying tactics in an attempt to turn the Custodies to their cause, which was never going to work considering the fact the Emperor actually entrusted information about Chaos to the Custodians. But when the Custodians realized what was actually going on, they would kill Cyrene, devastating Argel Tal emotionally, and despite being angry at Aquilon, he still had difficulty with the reality that he had to kill his friend. Fighting was a different manner, as Argel would mutate and his demon form would mesh with his armor, permanently making him what we would become to know as a possessed Marine, but Aquilon and the rest of the Custodians would die. And this event, even after fully devoting himself to Chaos, would bother him from time to time. And this is what is interesting about Argel Tal. Argel Tal is inherently loyal. More than anything else, he puts the mission above himself and always tries to do the right thing. He does not like being a warrior. He doesn't like having to torture and maim, but he does it in the name of his legion. And he will try to convert anyone to that cause, not because of the fact that he believes in it, but because of the fact that he knows it is the truth. This loyalist mindset, almost, the honor-duty thing towards Chaos, is such a unique twist that I don't see very often, and is one of the reasons why I not only really enjoy this character, but the Word-Bearers Legion as a whole. However, after this, he would embark with the rest of the Word-Bearers Legion to attack Calth and begin the Shadow Crusade, where his already then acquaintance with Kharn, the 8th captain of the World Eaters, would develop into a brotherhood and kinship that is one of the most heartwarming friendships I have ever read in fiction. Argel and Kharn are like two peas in a pod. They're the best friends that bounce off of each other and bring out each other's strengths. Kharn would allow Argel Tal to be level-headed and rational, and Argel would enlighten Kharn and lessen the impact of the Butcher's nails. And this would be seen as a problem, not by Lorgar or Angron, but by our good friend Erebus. Erebus, who like I said before, is a total scumbag, was also not one of the people shown the information by the gods during the pilgrimage like Lorgar and Argel Tal were. So, all the things that he thought he was doing in regards to trying to please the gods were little more than him just orchestrating schemes to try to get better over with Horus, and most of the time he was just talking out of his ass. But he did get one thing right. Kharn was favored by Khorne, heavily, even more than Angron, and Argel Tal was pulling Kharn away from the eightfold path that he needed to fall onto, as without Kharn losing himself at the Siege of Terra, the walls would have not fallen as quickly, leaving the siege to be lost when the rest of the Loyalist reinforcements were to arrive. This is where things get weird though, because Argel Tal, per Lorgar's visions, was supposed to die at the hands of Sanguinius at the siege, with the phrase, "under the shadow of his great wings," being repeated ad nauseum. So when Erebus, either knowing this, not knowing this, regardless, decided to not only gain a little bit of favor from Khorne, but piss off the other three Chaos Gods, Lorgar and Horus. Despite being warned by Lorgar and Raum that Erebus was manipulative and could not be trusted, Erebus, in a manner of good faith, would offer to resurrect Cyrene, something that would help Argel Tal trust him a little bit. But the fact that Argel Tal took the bait showed Erebus that Argel was too emotional and not to be trusted, despite having the blessings of the gods and, Lorgar. So during the invasion of Nuceria, Argel would fight by his lonesome against Titans and countless Loyalist forces, and when the dust settled, it was Erebus who was there to stab him in the back with the Anathame blade, and as Argel Tal would bleed out staring at the sky, he would die underneath the shadow of the Imperial Aquila on top of the Imperial Titan he helped destroy. This is tragic. Make no mistake, despite how reasonable Argel Tal is, he was a zealot at heart. He was a person with a good honor code and a head on his shoulders, but he committed such unspeakable atrocities and horrors that even Lorgar was disturbed at what Argel would tell him about chaos. But he was reasonable. He had a higher purpose, and this is where a lot of the speculation comes into play, because a lot of people are divided on whether or not he was actually supposed to die at the siege, or he was supposed to die in Nuceria, and to be honest, I don't really know. It could go either way, as chaos is not really easily understood, and that's a bit of the point. But the fact that Erebus just decided to take things into his own hands and just try to do this as part of his long-term plan to try to turn Sanguinius to chaos, which was never going to work. The fact that Argel Tal was one of the main victims of Erebus's shenanigans is just totally heartbreaking. But if that hadn't happened, they would have lost at the siege, but they still lost anyway. So it begs the question, was the prophecy even real, or was it just more warp shenanigans? To be honest, I don't know. But Argel Tal as a character is incredibly endearing and enjoyable, and was the perfect example of the best person possible for the job being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like I said before, read Betrayer, the First Heretic, Know No Fear, and also Aurelian. It talks about that prophecy in that short story. I mean, it's not as important, but these 4 are absolutely wonderful, and you should definitely check them out. Thank you all very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a member, and thank you very much to the channel members. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much for watching. Have a great night.